Renowned Hong Kong action star and director Sammo Hung created a niche in the action kung fu scene after the death of Bruce Lee in the late 1970s, especially for Golden Harvest Studio. As Golden Harvest started to give their artists free rein to create more variety of movies, Hong would form his own movie production studio called Boho Film Company Limited, and with his band of brothers supporting him with his martial arts features, Sammo Hung would start making notable movies in his golden era and propelled many of his clan to fame. The antagonism between the Qing dynasty official gown-wearing hopping undead vampires known as Jiangshi and the Maoshan Taoist priests became a cultural zeitgeist for a period of 5 years or so in the 1980s to the 1990s. It was Sammo Hung that drove this phenomenon, melding horror with comedy and martial arts, and eventually you have Lam Chi-ying, his classic Taoist master Uncle Chiu, and his Maoshan style of ghost busting. That was a major part of the success of this genre of movies. In this episode of Asian Trips, KQ will look through encounters of the spooky kind, or Guai Da Guai, from 1980, as Sammo Hung brought the subgenre into prominence, although it was not a straightforward Jiangshi movie to begin with. Sometime in the Qing dynasty, in an undiscernible town in China, Bo Cheong was a horse carriage chauffeur specifically for the wealthy Master Tam. Bo, as his name implied, went around town betting with people that he was not afraid of anything. Therefore, he had been challenged to some absurd courage test that immediately shown that Cheong was not as bold as his claimed to be. As audience, we were also informed that Bo's salacious and demanding wife had been unsatisfied of them wallowed in poverty and was indulging in infidelity to live a much lavish life she desired. Being cuckolded in the conservative Asian society was bad enough in contemporary times, much less back in the days of yore. Bo went hysterical against the adulterers, leading to the beginning of his own demise, as he was being wanted for mock murder, and worse still, having his enemy soliciting a Maoshan priest to put a death warrant on Bo's life. Odds were certainly stacked against Bo, but fortunately he encountered a master who happened to be the junior of this Maoshan priest that was employed to kill Bo. The kind-hearted priest was initially recruited to aid the money-crazy senior to accomplish his mission, but rejected it as it went against their religious teachings. Several foilings of attempts to claim Bo's life, a real hatred was boiling, and Bo managed to convince the junior priest to guide him as he dissociated with his previous life. This of course ending with a climatic showdown of martial arts and outlandish religious rituals. Young Sammo Hung assumed the role of Bo Cheong, and with his vitality and agility of his youth, he displayed the charisma and comedic chops that drew audience to be captivated with his lead role and rooting for him through the travails in this movie. Most of the comedic sequences were dated, yet a few that worked hit me good. There was a focus on creating grandeur kung fu fight sequences one after another, that the supernatural part took a backseat. The Maoshan rituals were coarse as compared to what Lam Chi-ying managed to research in his movies eventually, yet it was not totally negligible. The documentation of the beheading of a live chicken certainly will not pass censorship these days and will incur the wrath of the animals' rights groups. In fact, that really didn't add much to the whole ritual part, so I was taken quite aback with it. The dueling rituals at the climatic end was exhilarating and was something I always remembered in my childhood, when the good and evil forces in these movies always measure up and just waiting for that minute opportunity for one part to falter and allow the tide to change. The summoning of various deities to battle each other was a trope that would be influencing certain movies like Hocus Pocus in 1984, but it really added to the intrigue when the martial arts fighting had to pattern after the deity they had been summoning. For these Hung's movies in this era, you are bound to see familiar faces from his Hung clan, and I would like to highlight these actors who were instrumental to the success of this movie. Chong Fat, who I had mentioned in my review of Rigor Mortis, was playing the righteous junior priest here, and despite his naturally antagonistic facial features, audience can relate to him when he softened his steely stance to people in need of his help. The evil priest was played by the pudgy character actor Johnny Chan, who was a constant feature in many Hung and Jackie Chan's movies of that era. The gibberish chanting this priest was uttering was hilarious. Of course, it was never going to measure up to Lam archetypes, but as sheer pantomime, it worked. Speaking of Lam Ching-ying, he was in this movie as the ruthless constable who vouched to catch Bo Cheong. A young Lam without his classic wise priest getup was convincing as a loathsome character. The despicable Master Tam was played by Wong Ha, who was famous in Mr. Vampire as another wealthy man who turned into a Jiangshi. Lastly, we have Wu Ma, who would be crucial to the next movie I was going to review, and played a cat who was enlisted by the evil priest to set trap to endanger both. Encounter of the Spooky Kind was an effort from Sammo Hung, who wrote and directed the movie. There were certainly novel ideas for a Kung Fu film, and piqued interest with regards to supernatural elements that need not be the usual scary and solemn type of presentation. I found that there had been too many martial arts sequences back to back, which can be a bit dry and did not really move the movie, but generally the plot was decent for the time period. I'm awarding the movie a 7 out of 10. The Dead and the Deadly, or Yan Hat Yan, came hot on the heels in 1982 with a script written by Hung and Barry Wong and directed by Wu Ma, with almost the same cast as Encounter of the Spooky Kind 2 years before. Sammo Hung played Ji, or in my subtitle as Fatty, who came from a decent family specialized in funeral services, especially the manufacturing of paper models meant to offer to the deceased. Lam Ching-ying, under very awful old person makeup, played his stoic and stern uncle, who was trying to impart his knowledge in their trades to Ji, but to deaf ears, as the young Ji had his playful and wayward demeanor. Ji had a childhood buddy called Marco, played by Wu Ma, in horrible prosthetics, who came from riches but was another unreliable fool who was more concerned with his lack of sexual libido in a protracted American Pie style sophomore humor, except in a brothel in Qing Dynasty, China. After months of disappearance, Marco returned to town as a corpse, much to the shock of his friends, especially Ji, when he saw the procession of the return of the deceased was led by a sketchy-looking priest played by Chong Fat, and a pregnant woman who claimed to bear the offspring of Marco, therefore had claims over the family fortunes in the form of antiques that Marco's parents had refused to inherit to him previously. Ji grew suspicious, leading him to coming up with some plan to uncover the truth behind his buddy's sudden passing. One of the signature items that were associated to Chinese funeral was the presence of the paper models, which were meant to symbolize a deceased partner or servants when the dead cross into the nether world. When you see an inanimate paper doll moving for no apparent reason, it was a sight that would give you nightmares for a long time. The Dead and the Deadly might be the first time Hung's team used this concept, but as a disguise when it was a scare tactic against some dishonest individuals. Once again, this movie was not exemplary to display the intrigue of the world of Maoshan art of ghost busting, yet there was also not filling up with kung fu action set pieces to the brim. I appreciated the focus on the greed and the ugliness of the human nature on display, and every single character, with the exception of Lam's character and our heroine, whom I will cover later, were awfully flawed. The climax involving a borrowing of body of a living person in a quest for vendetta which went awry, something that was interesting to see as well, and there was some comedic banter and chemistry between Hung, Lam and director Wu Ma. Cherry Chong was a Hong Kong cinematic icon of the 1980s and an object of desire for many hot-blooded men of that time period. Chong would collaborate with Sammo Hung in the uber-successful Winners and Sinners in 1983, played the role of Wan here, the girl betrothed to Ji since they were babies, another cultural remnant of the yesteryears. Ji was not very happy to tie down to a marriage and never had much affection of Wan, although the fiancé was smitten with him. After Ji's unfortunate demise at the end, Wan, who appeared like for seconds at the start of the movie, despite Cherry Chong being featured prominently as the female lead, would be crucial to do the forbidden to bring Ji back to life by strictly adhering to the instructions of Uncle. This part was also something I had not seen before and was spoiled by the amateur puppetry on display. Upon doing research, The Dead and the Deadly, which was often forgotten and maligned in Sammo Hung's filmography, was actually been nominated for several awards in that year's Hong Kong Film Awards, so critically it had gravitas. This movie successfully distanced itself from Encounters of the Spooky Kind, from the characters, the main plot, and the set pieces for both action and the supernatural element, and was enough to stand on its own and not hanging on to the coattail of the successful predecessor to generate box office earnings. I appreciated the few interesting elements of old Chinese culture and belief, but I would say execution was subpar. The awful makeup and the visual effects were amateurish, even for that time period, if you compare to Encounter of the Spooky Kind. This is a classic 6/10 type of movie, even with Cherry Chong's truncated involvement. 10 years after Encounters of the Spooky Kind, Sammo Hung tried to resuscitate an ailing Jiangshi subgenre by gathering the creme de la creme of this genre of movies that his film production team had made in the halcyon days, with Barry Wong on the story and Ricky Lau in the director's chair, to an attempt to create a spark with Encounters of the Spooky Kind 2 or Guai Ngao Guai. Hung would play lead character Bo, with Lam Chi-ying as his master, Master Gao, and one of his favorite cast members, Mang Hoi, as his junior Hoi in this movie. In the prologue, we have Bo and his betrothed fiancée Ji eloping, with Ji's father leading a cavalcade of pitchfork and lighted torch-wielding villagers on their heels, with Bo's junior Hoi as the irritating schemer. Master Gao would hide them in a dilapidated temple or funeral parlor, and when they thought they had successfully eluded their human captors, the night would be shook with a Jiangshi couple, leading to a breathtaking scary action set pieces, which rekindled my well-hidden memory that I had actually caught this movie in the cinema when movie tickets were barely $5 in Singapore, and it was still an event to behold for me as a kid. Director Lau was so dexterous to concoct a classic Jiangshi sequence by this point, and having a human couple against a Jiangshi couple, with the Jiangshi being motivated with things like opium, and outrage of modesty, or even jealousy. Of course, it turned out to be a nightmare for Bo, literally. Bo did not have it easy in real life as well. Mired in poverty and a lack of career progression, Ji's father, who owned the big tea house in town, would slight him, always trying to break the engagement of his only daughter with the good-for-nothing future son-in-law. To compound to his misery, Ji was courted by Master Shi, the son of the wealthiest household in town. Master Shi would engage the service of a sketchy priest who is skillful in blood curses and spells that truly were toxic and abhorrent. Wong Ha returned as the vicious priest who used a lot of insects and venomous creatures for his spells, which indicated he was plying the gu, hailed from the southern China and parts of Southeast Asia. I enjoyed the animalistic nature of the ingredients and tools he used, including the small skulls, I suppose from primates, which he would crush and use to hurt his enemies. The actor playing Master Shi is a well-known glib-tongued TV host and comedian, Andrew Lam Man Chong. His personification of an exploitive villain, flaunting his wealth and power to demean his rivals, but wolf shit in face of adversity, was well performed and grind my gears in the process. While Bo was trying to get his life back on track to prove his future father-in-law wrong with his misconception, he encountered a wandering female spirit who refused to leave the mortal world as she needed to look after her aged and blind mother. So in typical Mr. Vampire Ricky Lau fashion, a female ghost was introduced to help our protagonist, while served as a sentimental facet of the plot, as well as love interest for side character like Hoi. Like Mr. Vampire, Master Gao would show no mercy against the ghost before he would listen to her sob story, and they had an extended confrontation before things got resolved. In the climatic showdown, Wong Ha's evil priest lost all sense of humanity and summoned some deadly things scarier than a few Jiangshi, and took quite an effort from our heroes to combat it. It was evident that Sammo Hung put in effort in the production value of this movie, and all aspects of the filmmaking showed quality. The plot flowed smoothly through the 3-act structure, something that was not always seen in Hong Kong movies of this time period, and the casting of the characters were on point except Hung himself, evidently older and heavier, losing that zest as compared to movies from a decade ago. I liked the duel between Mao Shan Craft and Nanyang Gu Black Magic, but I understand it could get quite dry if it focused too much on that part, and the Jiangshi element was much minimized to the prologue. This was more akin to a Mr. Vampire motif, which was apparent since Ricky Lau was the director, and I was nostalgic about it. Therefore, this was a 7 out of 10 for me. Please treat this Asian Trips feature as an introductory to more Jiangshi supernatural horror comedies from Hong Kong from the same time period, which I will review in this channel in due time. So if you like such content, please click the like button. It will also help my channel to grow with your subscription. My previous review was on Osgood Perkins' adaptation of Stephen King's short story, The Monkey. So do you guys like Sammo Hung in this kind of role for a horror comedy? He always portrayed as an earnest big belly fellow, but evidently his earlier movies showed that he was up to no good and was reaping what he sowed.